Hey, welcome back to Dalton Oddity. I'm Dalton, and today I'm going to show him this really cool Galarian Weezing. Let's do it. Now, I've made quite a few of these realistic sort of Pokemon at this point, though I think I've only shown like 2 of them on this channel before. The first step I like to take when working on one of these guys is to do a little bit of research and find some really good reference images. My favorite place to go is the official Pokemon website. They have a Pokédex containing all of the Pokemon. This is also where I get the canon height that I use to make sure everything is to scale. Then I like to print out a good forward-facing reference photo and pretend like I'm a math genius as I use the ratio between the canon height that we got from the Pokemon website and the height of the picture to determine the rest of the proportions of the body. I decided to build this guy at about 3/4 scale because the canon height for Galarian Weezing is 9 foot 10 inches, and there's no way I'd have anywhere to store this guy. Once all the measurements were determined, it was time to start constructing the base. I ended up going with paper mache for this project, honestly just because it is the most cost effective. The body of Weezing is basically 2 spheres, so I blew up 2 oversized balloons, one with a 20-inch diameter and one with a 14-inch diameter. I taped them both tied side down to a pot and an empty jelly bean container to support them as I applied the paper mache. For the paste, I used some waterproof wood glue diluted with a little bit of water. You don't have to use wood glue, any other PVA glue will work just fine. For the paper, I used a combination of ripped up newspaper and construction paper. Now, when it comes to applying the paper mache, I like to do things a little bit differently. Rather than dipping the paper into the paste, I like to take a chip brush, apply a thin layer of the paste to the area that we're paper macheing, then I stick paper on top of that, and then go back over that with another thin layer of paste, just enough to hydrate the paper. I do this working in small sections all the way around the balloon, doing up to 3 layers of paper at once. Next, you need to let the paper mache dry out completely. This may take up to 24 hours, but it's important to let each layer dry and repeat this process until you have about 10 layers of paper thick and your spheres feel nice and solid. This process took me about 5 days to complete, so if you wanted to save some time, you could totally use a polystyrene sphere or something else like that. However, it is worth mentioning that I began this project around the beginning of quarantine while I was stuck at home without a steady paycheck, so I was definitely trying to make do with what I had on hand. But anyways, once the paper macheing was complete, it was time to remove the spheres from their bases. Here you can see me drawing out the PVC pipe structure I plan to have on the interior, both for support and so we could pump actual fog out the top once we were done. Next began a lot of trial and error as I cut the PVC and holes into the sides of the spheres until I got it right and glued everything together like so. I also built a detachable base with some more PVC pipe and a piece of wood. Now for the teeth. My favorite method is always polymorph plastic. This stuff is so great and cheap on Amazon. You just pour some of the plastic beads into some hot water. I like to use an insulated cup like this to keep the water warm longer. Once the beads have melted and turned clear, you can scoop them out carefully with a spoon and begin molding them into whatever shape you want. I use this method to make all 6 of the teeth, and then I just let them sit aside to cool. Once they were done cooling and completely solidified, I used some super glue to glue them in place on the 2 heads where I had already sketched out the faces. Before moving on to sculpting the actual face, I wanted to further secure the joint between the 2 heads as well as where the PVC pipes connected. To do this, I used a simple batch of paper mache clay that I made with some paper fiber, PVA glue, flour, and joint compound, and then I just applied it to everywhere like so. Once this dried, I mixed up a fresh batch of paper mache clay. However, this time I used the original ultimate paper mache recipe, which I will link here if you want a detailed tutorial on how to make it. And yes, I used toilet paper this time. I know, in fact, I used 2 rolls of toilet paper. I'm so sorry. I know it's a precious resource right now. Please do not come for me. I begin sculpting the details of the face, starting with the mouth, and I'm using paper mache clay here again because it's what I was able to make. But also, I imagine Weezing as a sort of solidified mass of toxic waste that has a rocky sort of texture, and this stuff is so perfect for replicating it. When using paper mache clay, I like to keep a dish of water nearby that I keep dipping my hand into at all times to make sure the clay does not stick to me. I use a chip brush that I also dip into the water and stipple that all over the clay while it's still wet to get that rocky sort of texture. I also press some slightly bigger holes in with my fingers as sort of smaller versions of those large vent-like holes that it has all over its body. Oh, and I also glued down a bunch of cut down cardboard tubes to use as a base for said larger vent-like holes. Once done covering the entire body in the paper mache clay, I set this aside to dry. Now it is time to begin work on the Smokestack hats. I knew I wanted to use some L200 foam I had sitting around to make them, but first I wanted to make a pattern out of paper. This ended up just being some circles for the base, as the tapered idea I had for the top part of the hats didn't pan out. And this is where everything came to a screeching halt, because I realized I was out of contact cement. As I mentioned before, this was during quarantine, so I was forced to order it online, and it took 2 weeks to come in. I nearly lost my mind. To kill time, I began filming what I thought were genius video ideas. These included such hits as turning myself into a cat from Cats. I used my old Yeti costume, which I had to be cut out of because I'm so dummy thick, which then led to me filming my journey of getting fit with Ring Fit. Only lasted 2 days and instead gained 15 pounds. So thankfully the contact cement did finally arrive and I got back to work. I cut all the pieces for the hats out of 1/2 inch L200 foam. Here you can see the original taper design that I changed into a plain cylinder later on. I glued everything together using the long-awaited contact cement. And then I wasn't able to film this part, but I took the hats out to the garage and heat formed the tops to give them that flared out look. Now it was time to seal the foam. I used some matte Mod Podge that I lightly diluted with some water. And when applying it, I stipple it on rather than brushing it on. I imagine the reason Galarian Weezing has these tall, old-timey capitalist hats on top of its heads as opposed to its original counterpart is because it formed during the waste of the European Industrial Revolution, and smokestacks from the old factories melded onto its bodies. So I want them to have the texture of old corroding pipes, thus the stippling. I do 2 coats of this all over, even on the inside of the hats. While this dries, I begin painting the body. I begin with a base coat of purple. Now I know he is depicted as solid gray. However, my hypothesis is that from all that time he spent in the waste of the Industrial Revolution, a lot of coal dust and smoke started sticking to his body, while underneath he's still the original purple. I don't know how accurate that is, but frankly the gray on gray look really doesn't appeal to me, and I wanted to add a little bit more depth to the color. Next, I gave the hats a medium gray base coat using some acrylic paints. I then significantly watered down that paint to use as a wash on the purple body. I paint it all over using some paper towels to dab up any areas with too much excess. For the skull and crossbones type symbol on the chest, I first just hand draw the outline and then fill it in with some off-white acrylic paint. Once all that has fully dried, I then go back in on the entire body with a dark, almost black gray wash of paint. This is gonna mute down the purple quite a bit and really give it that dirty coal covered look. For the eyes, I just paint them on with some acrylic paint and add some veins using some red yarn, all of which is out of frame. I am so sorry. I did, however, get me adding in some yellow to the corners to make them look even sicklier. To age up the smokestack hats, I first gave them that same dark wash that we put on the body, and now I'm going to add some rust. I start by stippling on some rust-colored paint, mostly around the edges and down in all the crevices. I then go in with this really cool paint I found at Hobby Lobby. It's basically iron filings, inside of the paint so that when you spray it with the rust activator and it dries, the iron oxidizes and forms real rust. I'll also link an older video of mine here where I show you how you can do this exact same trick using some steel wool, vinegar, and hydrogen peroxide. Pretty much everything is done now except for this green sludge on the face. I'm not exactly sure what this stuff is supposed to be, but I don't think it's smoke like it appears. I think it's more likely some sort of slimy byproduct of whatever's going on inside its body. For the slime, I'm going to be using latex that I have colored with a little bit of green acrylic paint. I mix this up and stipple it all over the areas where I want the slime to be, and then I put on a little bit of cotton and cover it with more latex. It's just like when we were paper macheing, except instead of paper mache, it's cotton and latex, a very old makeup trick. The latex dried down a bit too matte for my liking, so I mixed a little bit of green paint into this glossy glaze I had sitting around and put that all over, letting it drip down the cheeks and let this dry completely. Lastly, I painted the base black and Galarian Weezing was complete. Oh, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I freaking love this guy. First thing I've made just kind of for fun in a while, you know? He's amazing. Perfect. Just inspired me. I had to do it. Hope you guys liked it. It was fun. Hope everyone's staying home, staying safe. Just keep on hanging in there. Yeah. Stay tuned if you want to see me turn my house into Adventureland to throw an amazing Adventureland themed party, because I need something to do and to look forward to. See you then. Yeah. Bye. Okay, y'all, I gotta get out of here. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Hey Siri, call Demi, please. Can't get it off.
How'd you get it on?
Oh, Demi. Kava, good luck. Okay, thanks for coming to my quarantine. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.